first thing I'm going to talk about, well, the next thing I'm going to talk about is Skype in the classroom. Now, Skype in the classroom is a website created by Skype, which is, I'll go to the next page. It's basically ways to connect your classroom with the outside world through 5 key main things. So we have virtual field trips, Skype lessons, Skype collaborations, mystery Skype, and guest speakers. I'll talk about the 2 that I've used most, but it's free, and you can use either your existing Skype address if you have one, or you can create one just for your class. And as long as you've got a webcam, or well, most laptops have a webcam, or even an iPad, or even a phone, you can connect using Skype, and it's opened up so many things for our children that I've worked with. So the 2 main ones that I've used are virtual field trips and mystery Skype. So these are the 2 I'm just going to talk about just now. So virtual field trips is a way of you going on a field trip without having to leave your classroom. So I'm just going to explain how it works just now. So virtual field trips, so you've got search by subject, age group, and location. So it's literally thousands upon thousands of field trips waiting for you to find them. They're all they're not some random person that's created one. They're all scientists, museums. It's all regulated and checked before they're allowed to go on the website. So, so you can go on a trip. So what you do is you filter, you search by your filters here. So you've got animals, art and design, geography, reading and writing, special education, technology, science. There's literally everything. So whatever subject you're teaching, you could probably find a virtual field trip that will match your subject. So so you click the filters, and when you find something interesting that interests you, you get a bit more information. So you click on it, and you've got here learning objectives, activity description, what choices you could do. So if you're looking at reptiles, turtles, alligators, you could speak to someone about that from the South Carolina Aquarium. Lesson time, and then so it gives you a bit more information. So what you do then is you click request this virtual field trip. So you click request, meaning that you're interested in that. Am I going too fast, David? Is that okay?
Seems okay to me, Simon. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, nicely paced. Yeah.
So then once you click request, you get this section here. So request a session with the South Carolina Aquarium. What ages are your students? What they're excited to learn about? Is there something special that your host should know? Suggest some dates. So that's a chance for you to give them a bit more information about what you're teaching. So say, for example, you were teaching about alligators or crocodiles. You might ask them to describe the difference or explain the difference between alligators and crocodiles. You might ask them to, maybe you've got a child in your class that is really engaged by the subject and really enthusiastic, and you might ask them to give them a little bit of a shout out and to say, oh, by the way, I've heard Trevor, I don't know where Trevor came from, I've heard Trevor loves this topic and he's doing really, really well. Trevor, I'd like to have a chat to you about such a thing. And it just brings learning alive in your classroom just by using simple technology. But what I would advise, if you're going to do this, make sure you just maybe test your Skype connection, because some councils and some schools, they block Skype depending on where you are. So something maybe to check first of all. And also, if you can do a test with the organization before you do the lesson, it's a good chance you have a little chat with them as well. And most of the time they would say yes. So you give them a bit of a description and then you're away. Now, when I first came to Tottenham Primary School, I had people that didn't so much have a growth mindset, some teachers. And I try to explain that it's really simple to use. Trust me on this. We'll go together on the first one. So I sat with one of the teachers and I said, right, what's your topic? They said, it's the Antarctic or the North Pole. I can't remember which one it was. North Pole. So, and then I said to them, right, okay, so we had a search. We used the search criteria. And then the day after, the very next day, the children in year 6 sat in the hall and we spoke with a scientist directly from the North Pole. So they had a live feed from the North Pole. We created some questions. We asked them some questions. It was the scientist that him here, I forgot his name, but it was through Digital Explorers, who are a really good organization. He is an ex-primary school teacher, which was just helpful for us. He was really good at speaking with children. And then one of the children asked, what's the weather like out there at the moment? So I said, right, well, I'll show you. So he turned around with his iPad and he walked outside and he showed them live. No, there's some waiting there. He showed them what was happening in the North Pole at that very second. And then at the time, the explorers, digital explorers, they were looking at the ice, the melting ice. And then they showed us exactly what they were doing, how the ice has melted, what it was a few years ago based on their data. And they were able to do all this from sat in our hall And I don't know what your budgets are like, but to get to the North Pole is quite expensive, but you can do it for free, sat in your classroom. So that's just what experience that we had. The other one I'm going to talk about just now is Mystery Skype. So Mystery Skype is basically a way of bringing geography alive and making it even more exciting. And what it is you connect with similar process that I've showed before. You connect with the teacher on the other side of the world, and your class is against another class. What you have to do is you have to find out where the other class is in the world before they find out where you are in the world using yes and no questions. So you get connected. Oh, beware of the time difference as well, because I accidentally Skyped someone with my test call in the middle of the night. There's a lady in New York who's in a bed with her husband, and I rang her while she was asleep, and she woke up and had to explain to her husband why some random English bloke was on the other end of a Skype call. So just be wary of the time difference. And also, if you speak to people in America, they flip the date around. They go month, day. I don't know why they do that, but they go months. So just be wary of those couple of things. So what's great is the children have maps if you're using Google Maps, like David said there, but they have all these resources in front of them, and they're asking yes or no questions to try to find out where the other class is. I've got a little video of it with my class, and we were speaking to people in Detroit, I think it was. At this point, they were struggling with the yes and no closed questions, so that we allowed them to ask more open questions. So this is a short clip of this happening.
Which Great Lake are you next to?
Which Great Lake are we by, friends? What
Michigan.
Oh, okay. Tell them, Lake.
Lake Michigan.
Right, Lake Michigan. Right. So, Lake Michigan was the answer. So my kids there, on the other side of the screen, they had the maps open. They were looking for Lake Michigan. We knew it was North America at this point. They looked at the major cities around Lake Michigan, and they were scurrying away trying to find out where the school was before they found where we are. One thing I would advise, if you're in a really small village outside of Yarm, or even Yarm, because I didn't know where Yarm was until I went last year. David said it was in Yorkshire. I didn't realize it was like pretty much near, it was like 2 hours away from me. So if you've got a small town, just choose a major city. Otherwise, the other people they'll never get where you are. But then once you've done that, you now have a connection with another school and another teacher across the other side of the world. So we connected with a school in Kansas, and what we did after we spoke to the children in Kansas and the school in Kansas, we decided to then write our topic at that time was the Wizard of Oz, we were reading Wizard of Oz. We then decided to write some versions of Wizard of Oz for children in Kansas. The Kansas children then decided to write some stories about Robin Hood for us, and we had like virtual pen pals across the other side of the world. So it's not just the actual act of the session itself, it's what you can do with it afterwards. Okay, so that's the website. That's Skype and Education. Honestly, I would just have a look at it and just give it a go and just see what happens. Be like Hazel. And the other thing that I like to do is Skype fishing. So this basically means just ask people. So whatever offer you're doing, or whatever topic, if you find someone of note and just drop them a text, or not a text, drop them a Twitter saying, we'd love to speak to you, or find, especially authors, if you find their publishing company and send them an email or send them a message and see if they'll speak to you. And you'll be quite surprised with how many authors actually do and will speak to you. So the first one I did at my school at Tottington was our first topic was the topic of the rivers. And there wasn't loads of great books about rivers, but I did find this wonderful book called A River by Mark Martin. So he's the author and he's also the illustrator as well. He's based in Australia, and the book is beautiful. It's a really lovely book. It's very good for year 3, 4, wonderful. So we did some work around the book. The kids were invested. They were so interested in the book, and I sent a tweet to him. I also found him his publishers, and I said, look, is there any chance we could speak to you? Because we've already bought your book. Any chance we could have a chat to you? Because the kids are so excited and so engaged with them. And he got back to me and said, yes, we will. And then, so he was based in Australia. We got the time sorted out. And then I said to the children, I said, right, we're all going to speak to Mark Martin. And they couldn't believe that they were actually going to speak to the author, that they were so engaged and invested in the book. And then we sat in the hall and we asked him some interview questions. And before we had the session, I asked him to set my class a writing challenge for the continuation of the story of a river. And if you read the book, you know what I mean. And so he did. At the end, he said, right, guys, I've got a task for you to do. Could you continue the story, maybe use things from your life, use your personality, and also do some illustrations? And the kids were so excited and so enthusiastic to do that. A week later, we had a follow-up session, and I had a girl called Tilly who really struggled with writing and was very reluctant. But for whatever reason, she was so excited about some of the work that she'd done in our class. So I said to Mark before we had the second session, I said, look, I've got a girl called Tilly in my class. Is there any chance you could maybe mention some part of the work that Tilly had done? And he said, yes. I've got it on camera.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed there was also some really nice illustrations amongst some of your work as well. So I think some of you could be illustrators, and some of you could be authors. Who was it that used the word shimmering before? That was Tilly. That was a very sort of earthly thing to write. Yeah, so I think there's definitely potential for some of you to become authors.
So could you imagine Tilly's face there? You can't really see her, but there's Tilly. She's actually smiling sideways. She's putting her head there, looking at me going, oh my gosh, Martin has just said I could be an author one day. Because I tell my kids, you can be authors one day, guys. Maybe one day you can be an author. And they sort of believe me. But when the author of the book that they're invested in, absolutely adore and love, is telling them all the way from Australia that you can be an author and quoting some of her work directly, they're so excited. And it's just so powerful. And if you think as an author, if you're writing for children, and you can sit in the comfort of your office or home and talk directly to the children that you're writing to, it must be so wonderful to see children excited about something you sat in your office or wherever you work and created one day. So we do this all the time. I wouldn't call stalk, but I think it might be borderline stalk. I kind of find people, whatever book we're doing, I find them, I tweet them, I stalk them. I find their publishers and I tell them that we love their book, any chance we could speak to you. And 9 times out of 10, they'll say yes. So we did another book called Stone Age, Bone Age. So this is by Mick Manning and Britta. So Mick Manning is the author. He's a really strong accent Yorkshireman. And Britta Granstrom, she's from Sweden. So they're a married couple. They're a lovely couple. They're so opposite, but it's great to speak to them. So we had a session where, again, they set us a writing task to do something. And one of the children, as part of the question and answer session, they said, Britta, how do you paint like the woolly mammoth in your book? So she turned around to me and said, can I just speak to you, Mr. Hunt? So what? I said, oh, hello, Britta. She said, right. Are you free tomorrow afternoon in class? And I said, yeah, we can be. And she said, well, I could do an art lesson. I could show you exactly how to paint the woolly mammoth if we do another session tomorrow and we can get prepared. So I said, yes. I did a bit of a fist-like pump, and then because that's my afternoon the next day sorted. And so we all went into the hall. We sat in the hall and we had a live art lesson from the studio of a renowned artist of exactly how to paint a woolly mammoth. And it's here.
Right, so that's his little wig. We go bum, and we go up like that, and do the trunk. Can you see that? You can make it blow in the wind like that, look.
And watch it. So the children there, they're all sat on the floor. We've got paper, we've got some black paint and some pencils. And the children are so excited because they're painting with a real life artist. And she actually sent that to us. I know you've been to our school, David. It's on our wall at school framed. She signed it. If she didn't sign it, Tottington Primary School at the corner, I could have sold it for quite a lot on eBay. But that's fine. It's on our school wall now. And it's as you go into our school, it's on the right-hand side. And she sent it to us. She also sent us some sign-free books. They've done, I've done this multiple occasions. Christina Balit, she'll Skype you. If you're a year 6, and there's an artist called Peter J. Black, who's done a book called Urban Outlaws, which is kind of like 5 kids that are like kind of a bit like James Bond, a bit like Stormbreaker, but a more updated version. And really strong female characters in there, which is why I chose that. He'll speak to you. He talks about why he became a writer, and you just find out other bits of information that you wouldn't know previous, because you can ask the author directly and you can ask about the process. So I'm just going to mention this just while I'm talking about being an author. So that's me in my nursery, in our nursery. Now, just before Christmas, I always, so for years I've told the children, you can be an author, guys, you can do this. We were having a conversation about what you'd like to be when you're older. So I was asking the kids, what would you like to be? I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that. And one of the children said to me, Mr. Hunt, what do you want to be when you're older? And I realized, because obviously the kids see me as a big kid myself, so they don't, when you're a kid, you don't realize if someone's 20 or 50, you've got no concept of age, but they see me as a big kid because that's kind of how I am at school. And I said, oh, I'd love to be an author. And then she said to me, it was Chloe Grundy it was, she said to me, you're always telling us to be an author, Mr. Hunt, why don't you do it yourself? And I thought, how can I now say, no, I can't? So I actually did. So the next few months, I've written a book. It's called Delilah Rose, the Bogey Princess. It's now on Amazon and eBay, little plug there. And it's about my daughter, Delilah Rose, who picks her nose all the time. And the reason why I decided to write this book is because there's loads of books about boys being silly and disgusting and jumping in muddy puddles and being a bit silly, but there's not that many about girls. And my Delilah, who at any point could jump straight in this conversation, I'm sure. She jumps in puddles, she rolls around, she has mismatching socks, she does all sorts. She picks her nose all the time. So I thought, right, I'm going to create one for her. So I did, and I went through the process, got it published, and amazing artist, illustrated by Fiona Cameron. And it's out there, and now it's on Amazon, and I've been to schools and read it, and it was on TV at World Book Day. So it's been wonderful. And that's because of the kids, and that's because of taking risks in the classroom. Because I took a risk on technology, telling and speaking to authors, eventually it kind of flipped back around and helped me out as a person in my career. And I've got a book, but my daughter loves right now because she's 3, but I'm sure when she's about 9 to maybe 21, she'll probably hate it. But for now, she loves the book. She walks around and tells people that she's the Bogey Princess, and she definitely is. Okay, the other Skype, this is one of my favorite stories about Skype phishing, is when you just ask people. So not just authors, I ask everyone. Now I saw on a Saturday night in Bolton, I watched this, it's on Netflix still now, this documentary called Blackfish, and it's an absolutely wonderful documentary. Has anyone seen it? Give me a little nod if you've seen the documentary. Let's have a look, some nodders. Okay, so basically it's an award-winning documentary about SeaWorld and killer whales, or orcas, and about how they're basically too big and too intelligent to be in these small tanks. And it's a really, really interesting documentary. It had a really massive effect on the SeaWorld shares. And in fact, now the SeaWorld trainers don't go inside the tanks with the killer whales. And they also have changed the logo, because it used to be a killer whale as part of the logo. Now it's like blue and yellow and just says SeaWorld. So they've kind of gone away from this because of this documentary, and it's really interesting. And the week after, we were looking at balanced arguments for and against something. So I thought I could use this because there's loads of information usually from SeaWorld about orcas in captivity, but there's loads of interesting things, including this documentary against killer whales in captivity. So on the Monday, I showed them a picture of me as a 16-year-old boy, because I went to SeaWorld when I was 16. I had an Arsenal shirt on with JVC. If anyone remembers the JVC sponsorship of Arsenal, I support Arsenal. I had curtains because I was really cool when I was 16. And I had a picture of me outside SeaWorld. So I said to the kids, who would like to go to SeaWorld? Showed them a video of the killer whales jumping around and splashing, and it is amazing to look and watch. And they all said yes. So we then decided to create some persuasive letters to our head teacher that we should go to SeaWorld and she should pay for it. And then the next day I asked the children, I said, how do you think the killer whales or orcas sort of got in the tanks in the first place? And they couldn't answer it because they'd just not considered that before, because why would they? And then I showed them a clip from Blackfish, which I'll show you in a few minutes, of them basically being taken from the ocean. And then they were shocked that this is how they get there. And it's stopped now, they're not allowed to do it anymore. But this was only till about 4 or 5 years ago that we're still able to do this. So they take babies from the mothers in the ocean. And then we did some work, looked at the arguments for and against. We looked at the arguments from SeaWorld, from other marine corporations, and also the anti-captivity people. And they made their own ideas up. I didn't tell them that you have to agree with what I think. These are the facts here, these are the facts there, what do you think? And what we did, we did some poetry. Now, when Sorry, I had to cough there. Just put myself on mute. When I do poetry in school, in year 4, especially in year 6, children have a really negative view of what poetry is in primary school, I found. And the reason why they have a negative view of poetry, sometimes, it's not always the case, is because some teachers have a negative view of poetry, and they'll have a spare week before Christmas, maybe. They'll go, oh, I'll just whack a poetry unit for a week. Or, oh, I'll do an acrostic poem in autumn with autumn written down the side, or I'll do it in winter with winter written down the side, or summer. Or they'll just have a negative view, and the kids can sniff you out in a second. If they know that the teacher's not into it and you're not passionate about it, then they're not going to be the same. And I found that this has been a thing. So what I did was, after we'd done some work on Blackfish, I said, right, guys, I didn't even tell them I'm going to do poetry. I actually hid the learning objective and said, we're just going to write stuff. We're just going to write some stuff down on a piece of paper down the center of the classroom. And what we did is I just showed them the header, I used to be. And then what we did, we decided to write some sentence about how they used to be free and in the ocean and kind of how they must have felt. Just write stuff down. Then I put they, and I'm going to show this next clip in a minute, where how they were taken from the ocean, how they would feel. Then I put now, how they're swimming around in these tanks, how they're not treated correctly. And will I, sort of going back to that I used to be, will I ever be free back in the ocean with my friends and family? And then at the end I said, right, we'll use that idea, that idea, that idea. And we took bits of ideas and we created a poem. And this is the part where the killer whales get taken, and I showed them this clip.
It was a really exciting thing to do until everybody wanted to do it.
What were they telling you were going to do?
Capture orcas.
They had aircraft, they had spotters, they had speedboats, they had bombs they were throwing in the water. They were lighting their bombs with acetylene torches in their boats and throwing them as fast as they could to herd the whales into coves. But the orcas had been caught before, and they knew what was going on, and they knew their young ones would be taken from them. So the adults without young went east into a cul-de-sac, and the boats followed them, thinking they were all going that way, while the mothers with babies went north. But the capture teams had aircraft.
Oh, can't hear you, Simon.
Sorry, I was still on mute because I was drinking my drink. I'll start again. So, as you can see, the children were just writing down the center of the on the paper, and we created a class poem. This is just some of it. I'll just realize time.
I used to be happy, have a family, live, eat and play in freedom every day, looking up at the stars. I used to be proud of my life. I used to ride the waves, gliding through the infinite ocean, smell the fresh sea breeze. My tall fin touched the sky. I used to feel alive. I used to be free.
That was created in the spare classroom in school. We had a green sheet, an app called Green Screen by Doing, and we were able to create that. If we've got time, I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But then we put it online, and then an organization called Anti-Park Marine contacted me. They're based in France because they still have a marine park that has killer whales that's owned by SeaWorld. They said, can I translate it into French? So I said, yes. A couple of days, the French version of our poem had 117,000 views within something like 2 days it was. So I thought, right, we're going to keep going with this. So this brings me back to Skype. So I found, so if you've seen the film, this is Sam Berg here. So she's directly from the film, and I found her on Twitter. She had a huge Twitter following. I found her and I sent her a message saying, hi, Sam. The work you're doing is amazing. Is there any chance you could speak to us? And she contacted me the same day and said, yes, of course. She said, are you free next week? So I said, of course, Sam, I'm free. She said, I've just got to speak to CNN. And then I've got to speak to Fox News and NBC, but I do have a spare 45 minutes. Can you squeeze me in? So I checked my diary and I said, yes, I can squeeze you in, Sam, of course. So I told the children, this was just before Christmas, that we're going to speak to Sam Berg, and they all knew who she was because they'd seen her on Netflix. We'd done some work around her, but they didn't quite believe that we were going to speak to her. But she spoke to us from Alaska. It's Christmas jumper day, guys, which is why I've got that horrendous jumper on, just to clarify.
All right. So, so you know me from the film then, you've seen me from the film. My name's Sam. And I started working for SeaWorld of Florida in January of 1990. So I was not quite 22 years old. And honestly, right now, you guys probably know more about killer whales in captivity than I did when I started working there.
We spoke to her for 45 minutes. She told NBC, who called her, the producer called her, that she's doing an interview soon, to wait because she's still on the previous interview. So we had priority over NBC for a while for whatever reason. And then we thought, right, I'm going to continue with this. So we decided to, there was a bill that was trying to be passed in the European Parliament about the ban of captive cetaceans in the EU tank. And basically cetaceans are dolphins, belugas, killer whales, anything larger than a dolphin that are too intelligent to be stuck in tanks. That's kind of the thing that was going through. So we thought, writing for a purpose, we'll protest that. So Born Free had seen our video, and they, Virginia McKenna, if you know who Virginia McKenna is, she's from the film Born Free, and she's the head of Born Free organization. She rang school and asked for me. So I got on the phone and she said, "Hi, it's Virginia McKenna here." And I couldn't quite believe that she was speaking to me. She said, "I love the work that you're doing. There's an event going on in Brussels that we'd like you to go to. If you could possibly take maybe you and some children, is any chance you could go, maybe hand in your petition there, and we're having like a little event while we're over there." So I said, "Oh, I'd love to." I spoke to my head teacher. I said, like, "Mrs. Barnes," which is my head teacher, "have you got about 10 grand to send me and a few kids?" And she got a box of glue sticks out and she said, "Look, Simon, we're struggling with glue sticks at the moment because it was that time of year. I can't afford to send you to Brussels." So I could have stopped, or I could have continued and found another way. So I did. I found a loophole. I found that European Parliament pay for educational visits to European Parliament if you apply and fill in all these forms. So I filled in all the correct forms, and I was able to, we got invited then to go to European Parliament by Sajid Karim. And this is him inviting us. It's a bit loud, this clip, sorry.
I am making this video from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. I really am so impressed when I have heard from your teacher, Simon Hunt, of all the work that you have been doing at Devonshire Road School. The work that you have done regarding whales in captivity has even impressed the Born Free Foundation. So well done to all of you. I really do look forward to welcoming some of you here to the European Parliament.
And he paid for it. He sent a 10 grand check. The only thing I had to pay for was the cost of coffee that I had in the airport. So we got 10 kids, my TA and my deputy head teacher, who was all, do you know when you usually put a note in the classroom or in the staff room saying, "Anyone interested in helping me out with such a trip or such a thing?" I said, "Anyone want to go to Brussels for 5 days, all expenses paid, and go to European Parliament?" Everyone signed up for it then. So we had to choose, randomly select 10 children, which was really difficult, but the other children that were not selected were really enthusiastic and proud of the children that were chosen randomly. So we got a taxi in the morning. We then flew over via Ryanair. We landed, we got a train, we walked, and then we stayed right around the back of the central square in Brussels. And if anyone wants a risk assessment to Brussels, I've got it. There is a small charge for it, but I will email it over after, because that took ages to do. The biggest risk assessment I've ever done. So then we went to the center of Brussels. And then, so the first day we went to meet Sajid Karim, you know, he paid for it, so I thought might as well. So we went and spoke to him. He did his photo opportunity, went to European Parliament. We handed in our petition. We had something like 3,000 signatures that the children from our school had collected. Then we had a little tour around the main chamber of European Parliament, which is just here. We kind of had a walk around. We thought this is really cool. So we had this presentation. And then that evening, because Born Free invited us to some of their events, they said, "We're having a screening of the film Blackfish on the second night that we were there. You're still invited." So I said, "Brilliant." So we turned up to the address that they gave us, but what we didn't realize, it was a full-on like film premiere with red carpet, with press, photographers, people from the film, the director. I just thought we were going to a screening of it. So we turned up. There's a large red carpet, and my deputy head teacher said, "Simon, you did not tell me that this is what was happening." And I said, "I honestly didn't know." So we got there, and so I rang the contact that we had, and they said, "Oh, yep, you're going to go down the center of the red carpet with us." So, right, okay. So they grabbed us. Then we walked down the center of the carpet, and there was press taking pictures of the director. And then they started to look at these 10 kids with blue jumpers on from England. Why are these kids randomly walking down the center of this red carpet? And I was really nervous, kind of like sort of smiling and just walking down the center. My kids were like, they were getting, we're getting papped, and they were like taking, like smiling, doing poses all the way down the red carpet. And then when we got in, we had some caviar, we had lots of food, we had, that's my deputy head teacher who was pleased that they had like wine and Prosecco and all sorts going on. She only had the 2 glasses, I may add. The kids didn't quite like I think they were expecting like Dairy crackers or something. But yeah, so then we watched the film. It was amazing that this experience that we had. And then straight afterwards, there was a debate going on in the main chamber, which is this one here, between sea life executives on this side and anti-captivity executives on that side. Would we like, we're invited to that. So I said, brilliant, we'll sit up here, it'll be really nice. I was wrong. We went in and they took us to the front. So we're on the front row there in the middle of European Parliament with a theatre full of European delegates, MPs, all these people. 10 kids from Bolton sat at the front, and me and my deputy and TA sat right at the front. And I thought, this cannot be real. There was a full-on 45-minute argument between SeaWorld and anti-captivity executives. And then at the end, they said, right, any questions from the floor? And then Bradley, who sat this side, he kind of looked down the row and smiled and nodded at me. And I thought, oh, Bradley, what are you going to do right now? Because I was a bit, I don't know, everyone knows Bradley, but it could have gone either way, this. He put his hand up. He put his hand up, and then he tapped the microphone because there's a microphone in front of us. And he pressed the buzzer, he went beep. And then so the chair at the front sort of looked down and was like, oh, who are these kids at the front? And Bradley gave this statistic, and to this day, it's the best thing I've ever seen. He said, excuse me, SeaWorld, because he called them SeaWorld. He said, why is it that 100% of male killer whales have a collapsed dorsal fin in captivity? And he said to SeaWorld, I mean the fin when it bends over, like they didn't know what a dorsal fin was. And then he said, but in the wild, it's 0.5% of male killer whales have a collapsed dorsal fin, and it's usually because they're about to die. What are you going to say about that, SeaWorld? Now, at that point, everyone sort of like erupted because the anti-captivity sort of smiled. The SeaWorld people didn't know they were going to get a question from a 10-year-old boy, and they also didn't know that their 10-year-old boy knew his stuff. So what happened at that point, the SeaWorld executives struggled to answer the question, and they had a person at the side that they told to run around and find out who these kids and this bloke was sat at the front, because they didn't know who we were. And they were not expecting us, they were expecting scientists and other people to ask questions, not these kids from Bolton. And they couldn't answer the question. They said, well, right, okay. And what the kids found hilarious is as Bradley spoke, all the other people that didn't speak English were getting it translated into lots of different languages, and you can hear it, and they thought it was hilarious. So then they said, right, any more questions? So what happened? Every single of my kids pressed the buzzer and popped the hand up really high and said, we've got a question. And for the next half an hour, my kids were having a full-on debate, argument with SeaWorld executives and wiping the floor with them. It was amazing to see. And I wish Ofsted would have been there. That would have been a good lesson for Ofsted to observe. Okay. And then as we got out, the press had heard about this. The kids then said to the kids, would you mind getting some pictures in front of the flags? They were like, yeah, of course. This was nothing to them. So they got some pictures in front of the European flags, and then we got back, and it was on the news, and it was amazing. A few weeks later, I got threatened by SeaWorld. So we had this really official letter arrive at Mrs. Barnes. I'll just read it to people that can't see. It says, we are writing to bring to your attention the Antidote campaign currently being headed by a teacher at Devonshire Road Primary School, Mr. Simon Hunt. Whilst we appreciate the subject of animals in zoological care is sometimes a subject of debate, I hope you agree that teachers have the duty to present all the facts and give equal premise to conflicting views and opinions, which, by the way, I really did. I showed them, I never said to the kids, you have to believe this or that. I said, these are the facts for and against, you decide. And then there were about 4 pages of arguments that they sent to us to counter what my kids had said, because they couldn't argue, they couldn't respond at the time of the debate. So I panicked because they basically threatened me. So I rang Bonfrey and I said, look, I think I've just got threatened by SeaWorld here. Am I in trouble? Am I like, going to get like the sack at school. What's going to happen? They said, right, send it to us. I sent it over to them. They had their lawyers look at it and they said, look, Mr. Hunt, basically what SeaWorld do is they didn't like what happened there. And when they don't like what people have done, they'll threaten people, make it look really official, and a lot of people will just stop doing or stop saying what they're saying. They've not got a leg to stand on, you're fine. And I said, are you really sure about this? Because I really don't want to get in trouble. He said, no, don't worry about it. I said, right, okay. So what I did was the counter arguments that they gave to us, which I knew wouldn't stand up if I showed the kids, I photocopied them on A3 paper, posted it around the classroom, and as the kids came in, first of all, they were furious that their teacher had been threatened by SeaWorld, and secondly, they could argue every single point as they went round. And then what we did was we decided to write 30 angry letters back to SeaWorld to counter argument everything they said and threaten them, and they said they would bully Mr. Hunt. So we threatened SeaWorld back, and then SeaWorld sent a letter back to me and then said, well, Mr. Hunt, you are now banned from every SeaWorld park and Busch Gardens for life. And so I've got banned from SeaWorld. Now, I don't know how that will be upheld, whether in the office, at school, we have a couple of pictures that with parents that you're not allowed in, whether they've got in SeaWorld somewhere a picture of me smiling that I'm not allowed in SeaWorld, but I'd be interested to see how that would work. But yeah, I got banned from SeaWorld. And then about a year later, this letter arrived on my doorstep. So this is a notice to EU members. So the petition that we were part of, and this directive that was going through EU Parliament actually got passed a year after. So the official law, so there's a law now in the EU Parliament, and that at the time of this letter, there was about 5 countries that had agreed to this directive. And when actually I'm named on here, and the children from my class are named on European parliamentary law. And this all started because I give Skype a risk. I give Skype a go. If you go back to speaking to Sam Berg. So it was amazing, but just quickly, it didn't stop there. So a year after that, the Netflix crew, they have a conference in Seattle every 2 years. And they said, would you like to present about the stuff you've done with your kids in more detail, the one that I've just done now? We'll fly you to Seattle, we'll take you to San Juan Island, which is just off the coast of Seattle. And the reason why they have it there is because the killer whales at that time of year circulate the island. So for a few weeks, they go around the island. So I said, of course. They flew me over, they picked me up on a boat. I was with the Netflix people, they took me to the island, and then a few days later I was presenting in a theatre with hundreds of people about the work that we did at school. And we also directly spoke to people back to the children that I was with at the time in Tottington, because we're doing something similar. But the beautiful thing was, the next day, I went kayaking, and I actually got to see killer whales just swimming near me. So I took these pictures because it was just wonderful to see from a documentary that I saw in my house a couple of years previous to then swimming, like kayaking with them. It was amazing. I'm going to brush over this one, but in between I did go to 10 Downing Street with Pamela Anderson, but that's another story because we're running out of time.